Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now here's your host, Roxanne Derhaj.
Hi, everyone. It's Roxanne Derhaj. Thanks for tuning in again to Authentic Living with Roxanne. Today, I have a colleague, Kamales Lardi. Kamales and I think, met almost a year ago at the Forbes Women's Executive Council, of which she was the chair, and I have since taken on that role. So Kamales brings a breadth and depth of knowledge as a strategic and bold thinker in digital and business transformation. She's been in this role for about 23 years. And she's a teaching fellow at Durham, and she's a keynote speaker, and she's recently released her new book. And Kamales, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Roxanne. It's been a pleasure getting to know you as well.
So Kamales, I should also let you know that Kamales did a testimonial on my book, which was so lovely for her to spend the time with her busy schedule and her young family. So today we're going to talk a little bit about when we were kind of talking prior to starting with the recording, we talked a little bit about what digital transformation is, because I think even myself, I'm in the middle of it, but to be able to definitively define that has been something that I think a lot of people kind of think it's, that's just kind of, the tech changes that you keep current with and what you do. But obviously you being an expert, share with us what digital transformation really is.
Absolutely. So it might surprise you to know, Roxanne, that digital transformation is not a new topic. It's actually been around since the 70s and 80s. As long as we've been using technology in the business world, digital transformation has been a topic for many companies. And I've been in, the tech implementation space for large organizations since the 90s. And I've seen technology transform the way we do things in business. What has happened, though, in recent years, over the last decade or so, is technology development has rapidly developed, or technology has developed rapidly, so rapidly that it's created opportunities for companies to develop exponential scale, exponential growth. And we're seeing such massive changes in the markets. And one of the things that I've noticed is almost on a daily basis, we're seeing new technology breakthroughs come out that are transforming the way we do things in business. And so digital transformation really is the application of technology for organization-wide change. And this does not just include implementing a technology solution. Many business leaders and companies tend to think it relates to rollout of a technology solution, the silver bullet solution that's going to solve their business issues. It's actually technology in the sense has massive impact on the way we do things. It can accelerate business outcomes. But digital transformation relates to organization-wide change. That means looking at how your organization operates today, how you access your customers, the kinds of operations you have, the skill level of the people in the organization and how they work, and transforming this towards a digital future with the help of technology. So it allows companies to really create more value in the market within a shorter time span with less costs, and to create real hyper-personalized experiences for their customers with these new technologies. So one of the most challenging things about this, over 80% of companies that are trying to implement digital transformation, they do tend to fail. And that's because they tend to underestimate the value of technology. They underestimate the one of the most key elements in this digital transformation concept, which is the people side of things. People can make or break any technology implementation, any strategic implementation in any organization. And so over the last 2 decades, I've observed companies almost underestimate the value of the people side of digital, the human factor. And this is what drove me to write the book, The Human Side of Digital Business Transformation.
It's so interesting, as we were just talking about how many synergies with my new book, which has been out but is in soft launch and will come for a full launch in a month or two. and Kamales, and there was so much, we knew that we had some synergies, we had talked a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about the people side, right? Now, before we jump into that, Kamales, what got you into digital transformation? I mean, I'm trying to picture a 6-year-old saying, one day when I grow up, I want to do XYZ in working with technology. What was it that, what was your path that got you kind of here in as a, a digital transformational business consultant? What?
So I'll be very honest with you, Roxanne. When I was maybe 9, 10, or perhaps even older, I was obsessed with the X-Files. And I was obsessed with becoming an FBI agent. So all I knew was Agent Dana Scully wore really cool suits and everyone respected her. And so that was my dream at the time. But, I almost came into the technology field by accident. I was always encouraged to go into more female-centric jobs, marketing, HR, things like that, or even into nursing or being a doctor and stuff like that. But something about technology, and this was the 90s. We got our first desktop computer in somewhere around 96 or 95. And so something about it just attracted me. And I decided to pursue an education in computing and information systems. And I realized that programming was something that I was very good at. Structured thinking, breaking problems down into smaller pieces, addressing those pieces, using programming languages to resolve, the satisfaction that you get when you resolve something or when you compile a programming language and it turns out to be correct. I don't know, these are things that I was really passionate about. And so I completed my studies in a very, very tech-centric field. And when I started looking for a job, I was actually poached by Accenture. And back then they were called Anderson Consulting. And I was very much attracted to the cool consulting image, and they had a really strong brand as well. And I found marrying the topics between business consulting, working with clients to resolve problems and bringing technology in to resolve the business issues to create value. This is something I became very passionate about. And so I've stayed in that field for over 2 decades. And I'm still extremely passionate about it. And what I find today is the capabilities of technology. I call myself a technology optimist because I think technology can and will solve a lot of problems and create so much value for the global masses if done correctly. And this is something that completely drives my passion.
Wow. So you'd really, Agent Scully didn't realize the impact that she was having on you as a little girl, but ultimately you found something that you were passionate about, which I often, so many people, their path, they don't get to be able to actualize some of the things that you're able to do. And again, likewise myself, I've been really, really fortunate. And my path was that I wanted to, be able to make people feel better based on some of the things that I had seen relatively early. And ultimately, when I work with leadership, it's about having them come in contact with their purpose and their voice. So it's interesting how, as little children, the ideas that you spurn, right? You having
absolutely, and I got to wear the cool suits as well. So
I've seen those suits on LinkedIn. So let's then go to the elements. We're talking about people, and in years when I was in corporate, so I'm going to date myself into the 80s and the 90s. This element of servant leadership or shoulder to shoulder was like kind of the thing. It was like too. It was too soft, right? Like you go in. I would report to boards, and oftentimes Roxanne's personality had to stay at the front door and be able to deliver on, it was about trending analysis on health and wellness strategies for huge companies. And I would always say there was something missing, right? That connection, and you're dealing with people, and we were told, no real relationship, just know what the customer needs. Look at the bottom line, look at the industry, what is the trending analysis, what's a SWOT analysis, and you keep going in that way. That element, it's so refreshing, I can tell you, and I'm not in corporate anymore, to see the element of all the things that I knew when I was in corporate that was missing in my internal space. So it's so nice to hear, like even on digital transformation, or even on the end that I work with leadership around, mental resilience, that we're actually starting. We have permission to be at the table to have this discussions with boards and things like that. So let's talk about, you said the people end of transformation. So tell me more about that and what you've kind of done with people in transformation. To your point, you're exposing companies to what is new, but that's not the only thing that you're doing with technology. Let's talk about the people end and how that fits in kind of the path to digital transformation.
I mean, what I've experienced over the time that I've worked with organizations since the late 90s, early 2000s, companies have always put a lot of faith into technology solutions. And we find that there's always a challenge with getting those technologies executed. And one of the things that I've observed myself is if you don't take people on a journey, if they're not convinced about what those technologies are, whether it's your internal employees, your teams, or even your customer base, they're not going to use it to the maximum value that you intend for it. Within organizations, what I've observed is when we implement a tech solution, and it can be the most inspiring, the best solution in the market, even the Rolls-Royce of solution, the best that could be out there. If the people are not bought onto it, I've experienced that people tend to fall back on what they're comfortable with and what they know and what they feel is going to bring value for their daily business. And so linking back any solution or any strategy to what people do and how they use it is the most important thing. But taking it a step further in digital transformation, you want to get people to advocate for those solutions, not just use them, but tell other people. And this is one of the strengths that we've seen over the last 15 years since social media has been out in the market. One of the best elements of social media is word of mouth. Right? People telling other people what to use, when to use, how to use it. And it could be a stranger across the globe that you've never met, but you take their word for it because they've used it and they experience. And that's the advocacy that we want to look for. And so taking these experience in mind, as I started working more with leadership teams, C-level teams, as well as board members, and guiding them in leading organizations that are becoming more and more digital, accepting more of these kind of digital adoption, what I started to realize is it's not just the people using the technology, but it's the people leading and driving organizations as well. So the key element around the human factor or the people side of digital transformation is creating an ecosystem of stakeholders or people that are working together towards a similar direction. Within your organization, you have leadership teams, business owners, board members, you have employees, and you have teams of people working together. And external to your organization, you have not just your customer base, but also partners, collaborators, and service providers. All of these people working together to create mutual benefit towards a digital future. And companies that are able to create this ecosystem of players that are working together are the ones that really, truly are going to succeed in the digital future. We're going to see these ecosystem players really becoming quite common as well. If you look at within the blockchain space, what we do find is oftentimes within industries, we have consortiums being created. And these are ecosystems of co-opetitions, right? Companies that would typically be competing with each other, coming together for a cooperation and creating a consortium environment where they work together to build a common solution. And this is something that we see digital transformation and new technologies driving more in the future. And so all of these elements, it's not so easy to create that environment. I think it is really about transforming your organization at different levels, transforming your the employee base or the people in the organization, creating more digital skill sets or developing more digital skill sets for them, enabling more technology use for better collaboration, for better connection and interactions, communication, as well as then transforming leadership teams. The traditional corporate environment that you talked about earlier, where we saw traditional leadership capabilities, those things are transforming in the current digital space. Leadership teams in the past, we used to demand for more, I'd like to say masculine skills, right? Directive, very pointed skills where the person who's leading or in charge in the room is the one directing the team, directing decisions. We've shifted into an environment where knowledge is democratized. Digital literacy is now democratized. There's more digital literacy in the room. Oftentimes, more digital literacy with the employee base, with more junior staff than with leadership teams. And so leadership teams have been forced into an environment to transform the way they lead these new teams and the way they lead organizations in the future. So this shift, I find this very refreshing as well.
Wow, amazing, because you may have somebody very, very junior and they're coming in with massive, so it's not about skill set deficits. So you're going to have a different conversation in that you're going to have someone coming in and sharing something. So as the leader in the old school, to your point, the leader generally had the information that they would be able to pass on and decide, through the level, starting from the C-suite all the way up down to the front line. But that's definite. So that's de-siloed really to some degree. You're seeing a lot of de-siloing within organizations where now someone just starting could be very, very junior, but they may have lots more capacity than maybe somebody that's been there for a long time or equally the same. So that's an interesting dynamic if you think about that around the boardroom, right? And then ultimately, how do you then capitalize on that information in the marketplace? Like, how do you, I love the word ecosystem, because to some degree, it's taking that pulse of your environment and deciding, kind of in my book, what I talk about is you have to figure out what is really going on with leadership first, because to go on this transformative journey, which I would love to talk more about, I often start with where is the leadership team, where they are in the 5 areas that I talk about. So with you, tell me your process when working with an organization. What's the, I know there's some 6 traits that you talk about, but even prior to that, what's the space? When you go into an environment, what's kind of your process to deal with an environment?
So I first have to preface, every company is different and unique. They may be in the same industry, they may be in the same business, but it's unique because every company has their own culture, their own dynamics, their own value system, their own kind of set of elements that are dynamic, that drive the organization, right? It's like a well-oiled machine that functions in a certain way. So one of the first things that I do, and the methodology that I've described in the book, it is a guide. It provides a guide for teams to navigate through digital transformation, but it is flexible enough in the sense that it can be customized for any size organization, any industry. It kind of puts you on the right path. And the first step, it's always to think about, and this is how I describe it to leadership teams as well. You think about it as a journey. In any journey, you have to identify, first of all, where you are, and you identify where you want to go to. And that's what the framework first does. The first step is take stock of where you are in terms of your digital maturity and readiness, where you are in terms of your industry developments, your competitive landscapes, the trends that are impacting your business, not just today, but also 2 or 3 years down the line, the kinds of customers that you're serving, the kinds of customers you intend to serve in the future, and the longevity of your business model as well. So testing the current environment of your business and understanding, does this business need to change? If so, where does it need to go in the future? And then we set the next step is really around disruptive visioning. So really coming in from inside out perspective and trying to define a vision for your organization, where you need to get to, and what your organization needs to be doing in 3 to 5 years. And I say 3 to 5 years simply because the market is very dynamic today. In 3 to 5 years, you can see organizations completely crumble, as well as startups become billion-dollar businesses. Mm-hmm. That is really the market we're playing in today. And so driving this kind of vision of where you need to be in 3 to 5 years in order to really sustain your presence in the market. And then defining a roadmap, a strategic roadmap around what needs to get done. And not just from a technology implementation perspective, but really looking at building blocks around what do you need to be doing with your customer base to create those hyper-personalized connections with them that's going to connect them to your organization and brand in the long term. Looking at your product and service portfolio. Are you producing the right things? And should you be doing something different or offering something different for the digital environment as well? And then looking at your employee base or your organizational environment, your operational environment. Are you doing things in the most effective and efficient way? Do your people in the organization have the right skill sets? And all of these kind of questions around organization structure and also your business model. is this the revenue stream that's going to last you in the longer term? Can you create more revenue streams? A simple example to that is many organizations today do sit on a massive amount of data, and data can be monetized if you are able to understand how to do that or how best to do that. And so these are elements that, we can find new revenue streams and new ways for companies to monetize. So once we create that roadmap, we prioritize it and we look at, companies typically work with a limited set of resources and investment. So where should you be putting your time and money and people? What's the best returns you can find? And then finally, we go into the implementation of those elements. So the whole process takes between 3 to 6 months, but we do end up typically working with companies up to 2 to 3 years, because this is really an evolution process. It's a journey. And every time I work with organizations, they're almost surprised that, okay, this is something, we need to keep going because we're finding results now. Let's keep going on this journey. And so this is something I absolutely love, though, because you get stuck in, you get really into, with the organization, you go on this journey with them and you see the proof to the pudding, basically, at the end.
Right, because you're thinking 3 to 6 months. Oftentimes people are thinking, "Oh no, that's going to be too long." But then when they start to take the steps, and I'm going to assume they're starting to see the light and saying, "Wow, this is more," and they're seeing the impact of the actions that you would have, suggested that they implement, and then wanting, okay, if this is working so well, what next and what next? So let's talk a little bit about those 6 traits so you really. Like you said, you go, there's 2 things that you said, Kamales, which I love, inside out, which is like, we have to look and see really, and you have to be really truthful, I think, going through this process about, love the fact that I created this product, but when you kind of go through this analysis, you're realizing it's taking this much hours and the revenue stream is really, you're always pumping air into it and it's not so good. So you have to really be willing and to be transparent with what is. Another thing you talked a little bit about is leadership and what leaders need to do to connect to the customer. And I want to talk more about this. I think that's very, very vital. Like you said, with things like social media, if I have a bad experience today and I put something on and I've got a big enough following, I can quite quickly disrupt something within a company, right? So we have a lot of power as the consumer. So in the book, you talked about those 6 traits because you said, it's the vision, right? Like everybody has to buy into the vision, but it starts with the CEO or the senior team. So tell me how you kind of work with them. You might have a CEO that thinks, Lardi and Associates, we definitely want to work with you, but with teams that have been working together for a long time, there's history, there's disconnections, there's people that have some implicit power that we may or may not know about, or there's alliances, all that stuff. So with CEOs that you've worked well with, meaning that, let's say they're a good CEO or somebody that can transform, but they're working with a difficult kind of senior team, what is your approach with an environment like that?
So I first of all, I think to preface that, leadership teams, many companies, let me start with this. Many companies do approach digital transformation with a technology team or a transformation team. And one of the biggest challenges with that is you can take the transformation to a certain level, to a project or initiative implementation level. But in order to really benefit from digital transformation, you need to transform organization-wide. And something that I personally experienced and had to learn was I had to first transform as a leader in order to initiate transformation in organizations. And this was something that was, with any transformation, with any journey that we go on. And I think you have this detailed out in your book as well, which I found really refreshing because we had a really nice alignment to the work that, that I do on the ground with the customers as well. Really transforming it means looking at yourself, your leadership style, your approach in an organization, the way you are, how self-aware you are, but also how you connect with your team, how you motivate teams. And this is something I had to learn by doing, right? Going through that transformation process myself. And so today I do a lot of digital mindset coaching for leadership teams and board members. And this means, oftentimes, I'll be very honest, they are older men who lead organizations. And it is very interesting because we do tend to have very different perspectives. We come from a completely different mindset. And one of the experiences I had during COVID was I was doing a coaching with a person from, who had 35, 40 years experience in leadership. And he had never led an organization where people were not physically present. And so he broke down in tears because this was extremely challenging, right? For someone who had a secretary who did most of his digital interactions. And now he would have to face this on his own and kind of lead people and lead teams. It meant letting go of control. It meant trusting people beyond your physical space. So these kinds of transformations, and what I did with him was we entered into the virtual reality space, metaverse, and we did our coaching sessions in there. And he completely forgot that we were not physically together in the same room. And so this was, I think, an eye-opening moment because he realized, okay, technology has the ability to extend our capabilities. If we use it in the right way, we know how to use it, we can go beyond Zoom. We can go into a space where we feel like we're connected with one another. It's almost, almost reality, I would say. So one of the things I do with leadership teams in the formal project environment is really to look at stakeholder analysis. And I can tell you from experience, there's always one person in the room who doesn't buy, who doesn't buy in.
Just one. I found that sometimes it's a couple.
At least one. And it's usually either the head of technology or, the head of HR or something like this. Somehow the trends are, undeniable. But a stakeholder analysis helps to understand, who the people are in the room, what kind of influence they have, who do I need to connect with to get buy-in and to empower, to transform. And I do work very closely with leadership teams because even if you come in from the roots, right, from the ground up to transform a company, leadership teams drive the real transformation. It is the top-down that can implement organization-wide change. You need that top-down mandate. And a big part of that means taking people on this journey. Leadership teams need to transform. And what I've found in my experience, and maybe you can share your experience in this as well, you can't transform unless you're ready to.
Right.
And this is where I choose my battles. There are some leadership teams that are, ready to go on that journey with us to transform the organization. And there are other team members who might say, we just want to implement a project. Mm-hmm. And then they're not ready and it's not the time. And so this is really a journey. It's an evolution. We go on this journey with the company as far as their readiness is, and we take them to the next step as far as they want to go. But you can't force this transformation either. Within the book, I do detail a couple of things that I've observed. Leadership teams, business leaders need to have in the digital future. So I've detailed those out as 6 traits for leadership for future organizations. And this involves, one of the key things is really abundance thinking or abundance mindset. And that is being able to think beyond your current boundaries, current industry boundaries, current business boundaries, current physical boundaries. We have now, with new technologies, the ability to enter new markets, to, even startups can have on day one of business access to a global marketplace. So our traditional industry boundaries, our physical boundaries as well. You don't need a branch to enter a market. You don't need a physical office. Companies can exist virtually and still be $1 million business. And so these traditional boundaries are no longer valid. And business leaders need to be able to think beyond those boundaries and understand that technology creates those seamless existence as well. The other element is really around empowering people, being able to trust that your teams can do what they're meant to do and empowering them to do it. And a good amount of this is, understanding that failure is a learning process, that you have to develop with failure. Without failure, you don't learn. And this is a key element that many corporates don't tend to embrace, I would say. The next element is around consciousness and empathy, which is really, really important. To be aware of your surroundings, to be aware of why people do what they do and why people behave in the way they behave. And what I've learned is resistance to change usually comes from an element of fear of losing control, fear of not knowing something or not understanding something, fear of becoming irrelevant in the tech environment. And so understanding this and having empathy towards it and having an understanding for how we can take people on that journey you can learn new skills. It's not difficult to learn. You have to shift the way you look at your role. All of these kinds of things need empathy and a certain amount of vulnerability to connect with people. Looking at flexibility and adaptability, we've seen a lot of that during the COVID environment, which is the next element. So within COVID, many businesses were able to pivot and transform and very quickly shift and adapt to the new environments, which is the non-physical space. And also closeness to customers, which is something you mentioned. What I found very surprising is most C-level executives don't have direct interactions with their customer base. And they, rely on HR or marketing teams or even sales teams to get an understanding for the people on the ground. And this is, I think this should change. We see many organizations now taking their C-levels to branches to connect with customers, on site, really to understand how people use their products and services, what their needs are, what is the problem space. And I think this connection makes these leadership teams more human as well, and more accessible. So these are some great examples I'd like to see more corporates incorporate. And the last one is, of course, courage and conviction. Transformation, digital transformation can be a really tough process. And you need people who are bold enough to initiate and to stick with it and to drive that change. So those are the elements that I detail out in the book.
Well, I think to your point, right? You can only take a team as far as they're willing to go. And I say sometimes it's pockets of work that you do. You do it, you can only take them along for that far. And then if you recognize the next steps that they need to make and you're getting massive pushback, then that means they're not ready to take the next step of the journey. And you have to say that to them. I think we've done, really good work together. This is where I think we need to go. This is my sense of what I'm getting from your environment. You need to reflect on this and give me direction, because of course, it's like you'd be doing that tug of war, to what end? And then you're not going to be able to create the change. And then that's the legacy of you being in the environment. And you want to leave on that note that you've done the part that you agreed to. This was such a great interview that we decided to turn it into a 2-part series. Be sure to tune in next week for part 2, so you don't miss out on the amazing content.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannederhaj.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.